Everyone, so today we are with International Union of Sex Worker in UK.
Hi, I'm Catherine Stevens. I'm a sex worker and I'm an activist for sex workers' rights.
Yes.
And shall I tell you a bit about our organisation?
Yes.
Okay. The International Union of Sex Workers is an organisation of people who work in all areas of the sex industry, and we campaign for policy that's based on evidence and that prioritises the human rights and the safety of people who sell sexual services, and that it's built on the inclusion, the consultation of those most affected in making decisions about policy. And we campaign for decriminalisation of sex work. So we believe that we have the right to work together freely, to make decisions for ourselves, and to work safely.
Okay. And can you tell us about the history of the organization, how it was founded or something?
Okay. The IUSW was founded in 1999 by a migrant sex worker from Portugal, and it focuses on the idea that sex work is work. It campaigns for recognition of sex workers' work, and through the IUSW, the UK trades union, the GMB, which is one of the largest trades unions in the United Kingdom, created a branch for people who work in adult services, so in prostitution, in pornography, in stripping, and phone sex, and it accepts people from all areas of those industries as members. And as I say, we campaign for evidence-based policy. We've been focusing on policy for the last 8 years, kind of in reaction to a push for increased criminalisation. So the last government, since about 2004, was looking at changing the law on the sex industry, and we became involved in trying to influence the law so that it didn't make our lives more dangerous, and so that it gave more rights and safety for people in the sex industry, whether from the UK or whether migrating to the UK from abroad.
Just in case the people not know the word criminalization and decriminalization, can you give me some example of like a current law or act that are still like criminalization that
Sure.
you are like try to decriminalize?
Okay. In the UK, the laws that relate to sex work don't relate to violence or to exploitation or coercion. They relate to people working together. So people are criminalised if they work together. For example, if two people are working from the same building, those premises are considered a brothel. It's legal to sell sex, so but if two people are in the same building, those premises are considered a brothel, and the person whose name is on the tenancy agreement can go to prison for up to 7 years. It's also a criminal offence to arrange work for other people, and it's a criminal offence to give someone a lift to work. That's considered trafficking in the UK legal definition, and so we're campaigning for decriminalisation, which would mean that consenting adult sexual behaviour is not regarded as a criminal offence. We're allowed to work together, and there are still laws against rape, against violence, against exploitation and other abuses, but they don't relate to consensual adult sexual behaviour.
And in terms of talking about like legal and illegal, can you tell us a little bit like what is sexuality act that legal and illegal, like you tell me before, like indoor and outdoor?
As for indoors, it's legal to sell sex so long as you're in complete isolation.
Like individual person who
An
sells
individual,
sex for
yes.
the money?
But any situation where there's more than one person in the building, even if they're never there at the same time, is a criminal offence. Outdoors, it's illegal to solicit or loiter for the purposes of prostitution if you're looking to sell sex, and it's illegal to curb crawl, to seek to buy sexual services outdoors. And one of the things we know from the evidence about what happens when you enforce those laws against either people selling sex or against clients, people who are buying sex, is that leads to greater impact on the communities and greater dangers for people selling sex.
Okay. And can you tell us more about the young people and sex work and the age limit?
Okay. In the UK, the age of consent for sexual behaviour is 16. However, to consent to having sex for money, the age of consent is 18. And young people selling sex have a range of experiences. So some people, generally the age of people selling sex on street is younger than people working indoors. The average age of entry into sex work on street is about 16 years old if we look at people who started working both as adults and as underage. In terms of people off street, you're looking at an age of entry between 20 and 25 years of age, according to most of the information we have. And people's experience of selling sex probably varies more depending on whether they're working indoors or outdoors, or whether they're a migrant or UK born, or whether they're a migrant without papers, than depending strictly upon their age. It's more. There are some specific services available for people who are young people in commercial sex, and one of the things some of those services report is that some of their service users aren't necessarily trading sex for cash. They may be trading sex for accommodation, or they may be trading sex for favours. They're not necessarily thinking of themselves as sex workers.
Okay, but yes, and just want to get the big picture of the sex industry in UK. Like, how many people, and what is the gender orientation and proportion?
Okay, it's the data we have is not particularly robust, but the best estimate we have for the number of people selling sex in the UK is 80,000, and that's a piece of data from 1999, and it's based on a series of extrapolations of estimates from the number of service users of specialist projects. Estimates for the number of people selling sex on street go as low as 3,000 and as high as 22,000. So even if you take the very top end of that, you're only looking at slightly more than a quarter of people on street, so 3/4 of people are indoors. Estimates of the number of people who are trafficked in terms of the Palermo Protocol definition, i.e. subjected to fear, force or fraud, is at around 3,000, so about 5% of people in the total sex industry. But anti-trafficking enforcement policies have been used to target prostitution in general and all migrants in the sex industry, rather than focusing exclusively on harm, on trafficking and on coercion. And that's been driven by an anti-prostitution ideology. In terms of breakdown by gender, we don't have any information about that. I've seen one estimate that in London, 30% of people selling sex are male, but there's no robust data. And again, in terms of the general proportion of migrants in the sex industry, London has more migrants in any sector of the service industry than the rest of the UK, and that's true of the sex industry. I'd say probably about 85% of people selling sex indoors in London are migrants.
And in terms of the rights and the duties, like, can you tell me a little bit about, like, do the sex worker pay tax, and about in terms of access to treatment and services?
Absolutely, the tax office will take our money, and I've been in brothels that were visited by the tax authorities. So they go out, they proactively seek to tax the income we receive, even though our labour is not recognised as work. They will still take the money from our income. And in terms of rights, again, they will take our money even though we don't have the same rights as other people. We don't have the right of freedom of association, and because of that, we don't have the full protection of the law. Both of those things are fundamental human rights. They're in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, but we don't have the full protection of the law, because if we contact the police to report crimes against us, we may be arrested. Particularly if we're working with other people, we may get arrested, and there are numerous cases of that. So basically it means that people can commit crimes against us and get away with it.
Yeah, and what happens if there a case that there's sex worker who work and get paid, not pay tax? Is it? Yeah, I think it's happened, right?
some people don't pay tax, and if they're caught, they will be prosecuted for tax evasion in the same way that other people will be. And there have certainly been cases where the tax office has prosecuted for people for tax evasion, and I've heard of cases where either the tax office will have somebody sitting outside someone's front door counting the number of people going in and out, and I've even heard tell of people from the tax office saying, well, you're really pretty, so you must have made lots of money, and guessing how much money somebody's made on the basis of how they look, or other very, very tenuous kind of decision-making grounds.
And in terms of access to services and treatment or something?
In terms of access to services, in some areas, particularly in London and major cities, access to services is relatively good in terms of sexual health. Sexual health services are often separated from other services within the National Health Services. And one of the benefits of that is that sexual health services people delivering those services don't check that people are UK residents and entitled to receive free treatment. So migrants, everybody is able to receive free treatment in that way. And that many of those services will stretch the activities they're able to provide, the support they're able to provide as widely as possible, but that's getting increasingly difficult in a climate where funding is being cut and less evidence-based policies relating to drug use are being used to provide services to drug users.
Yeah, and can you tell us more about the drug user that related to sex worker?
Problematic drug use is overwhelmingly associated with outdoor sex work, which, as I say, is between 5 and 25% of the sex industry as a whole. And drugs, the most common drugs used are heroin, crack cocaine and alcohol, and that varies from area to area. One of the problems is that there's no medical alternative to crack cocaine, so helping people change their lives for the better is very difficult, particularly in a situation where providing people with services, accommodation, support with mental health issues, training, access to well-paid work is very difficult. So enabling people to get into a situation where they're ready to leave behind problematic drug use is very hard in the UK at the moment. In terms of indoor sex workers, I'm aware of no evidence that shows greater problematic drug use amongst indoor sex workers than in the general population.
Yeah, and previously you talked about also it's become vicious cycle between the partner, right?
Yeah, one of the things that is often the case in terms of people working on street is that they may have a very high cost drug habit, so kind of between £1 and £450 a day in terms of drug consumption, and may well be in a relationship with a man who is also using drugs, and the options in terms of generating the income to support their habit are pretty limited in terms of making that kind of money every day. You're looking at prostitution, street crime in general, shoplifting and car theft.